The craziest survival tools early humans ever invented. Here is the direct English translation of the script above, translated accurately without adding, removing, or omitting any content. Imagine standing in the middle of a pitch-black night. Not a single flashlight, nor a spark-striking match. Around you is only the bone-chilling cold, your hand gripping a sharp rock outcrop, and somewhere behind the rustling tree canopies, a threat is lurking. Sounds like your worst nightmare, right? But for most of human history, this was nothing more than a regular Tuesday. Seriously, for roughly 300,000 years, our ancestors survived without metal, without electricity, and naturally without any modern conveniences like we have now. And yet they created tools so refined that even today's top engineers, looking at them, cannot help but be amazed and admiring. How did they do it? Let's start with something that sounds incredibly simple, but was a fulcrum that changed the whole world: a sharpened wooden stick. Around 300,000 years ago, in a land we now call Schöningen, Germany, archaeologist Hartmut Thieme and his colleagues excavated a set of wooden spears buried deep under the ancient mud of a dried lake bed. These were by no means hastily carved branches. They were crafted with extreme care, with weight distribution balanced perfectly, no different from modern athletic competition javelins, heavy-fronted, slim-bodied, helping them cut through the air to fly straight and pierce deeply. Wood, as a material, is naturally very prone to rotting over time. But that very damp, oxygen-deprived layer of mud accidentally preserved them intact across hundreds of millennia. Without that lucky burial by nature, we might never have known that tens of thousands of years before writing existed, ancient humans already knew how to apply aerodynamic principles so ingeniously. Try pausing for a moment and reflecting on that. Long before humans knew how to farm, before there were small villages or anything we would call civilization, someone sat by a crackling campfire, pondering a question that perhaps in your whole life you have never had to worry about. How do I make this wooden stick fly farther and pierce even deeper? And that creative mindset did not stop at spears. Tens of thousands of years later, another tool was born to solve a problem that any hunter had to scratch his head over. The strength of a human arm always has limits. And so the atlatl, a spear thrower or dart launcher, came into being. Basically, it was just a short wooden rod with a hook at the end to hold the tail of a dart. But that tiny piece of wood acted like a lever extending the arm, multiplying the human throwing force many times over. Thanks to it, a hunter could launch a spear right through the thick hide of a bison from a safe distance, a distance far enough to keep them alive to continue hunting tomorrow. Researchers like John Shea, who has spent decades of his life digging deep into stone technology and prehistoric hunting techniques, have proven that hidden behind those tools that look embarrassingly simple at first glance is a deep understanding of physics and survival skills accumulated over generations. However, not every survival tool was used for hunting or killing. Some inventions were born to overcome a tiny, yet most ruthless and persistent enemy of humanity: infection and disease. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists discovered a toolkit dated to roughly 100,000 years old. This discovery completely overturned our perspective on the intelligence of ancient humans. Inside a hollowed shell, researchers found traces of ochre, a red-orange mineral pigment, mixed thoroughly with animal fat, charcoal, and finely crushed bone. Everything was meticulously prepared right inside that prehistoric bowl. This was absolutely not a random scramble. It was a recipe, meticulously crafted and carefully stored for later use. Why does this carry such enormous significance? Because once there is a recipe, it means there is calculation and planning. It proves someone understood that. When combining ingredient A with ingredient B, they would produce a specific repeatable result, and then knew to store the leftovers in a container for future use. That is the foundational mindset of chemistry, of cooking, and even of modern medicine. Long before instructional books existed, our ancestors already knew how to think in scientific formulas. So let's try reliving a day in their lives through those tools. You wake up before sunrise, not because of an annoying alarm clock, but because the biological clock inside your body has been running to the rhythm of the sun for thousands of years. The campfire from last night has now burned down to a few cold red embers. You hurriedly use a fire-starting kit, perhaps a hand-rotated wooden drill or a flint struck hard against pyrite, to carefully fan those warm sparks back to life. Because without a guarding fire through the night, the deep forest cold and the lurking wild beasts would grow ever bolder. Breakfast is never a guaranteed promise. You have to go check each knot-tied snare made from twisted plant fiber, which was carefully set the previous afternoon along small game trails. If lucky, you will have a small animal for breakfast. If not, you grab a digging stick, a stick whose tip has been hardened over fire, and painstakingly dig up every root and tuber still hiding under the damp soil. By noon, the whole tribe begins preparing for a big hunt. Someone carefully inspects the balance of a spear, much like a mechanic today meticulously tunes every bolt on a car, measuring weight distribution, testing the flex of the shaft, the sharpness of the point. Someone else carefully loads a dart into an atlatl thrower. A hunt like this does not rely on brute muscle force alone. It is a combination of physics, accumulated patience, and tools that have been honed over thousands of years of trial and error, passed down by hands-on instruction rather than through any printed page. By dusk, if the hunt returns successful, sharp stone flakes struck off from a large stone core will be used to butcher the meat. The precision and dexterity of this process would certainly astonish modern people like us. And then before drifting off to sleep, that morning ochre mixture might be reapplied onto the skin, perhaps to shield against harsh sunlight, perhaps to repel insects, or perhaps carrying a deep spiritual meaning that to this day we are still earnestly trying to comprehend. But here is the unexpected twist that few would think of. We often interpret technological development as a straight line going straight up, from crude stone to carved stone, then to bronze, iron, and machinery. But the archaeological record tells a completely different story. Around 71,000 years ago, at sites along the southern coast of South Africa, researchers found tiny stone blades called microliths, tiny stone edges set into wooden or bone handles, much like how we insert razor blades into razors today. Then some time later, that sophisticated technique seemed to disappear completely from the record, only to reappear again much later. Human creativity is not a straight staircase going into the clouds. It ebbs and flows, breaking intermittently. When a tribe was populous, tools grew smarter, But when natural disasters or diseases shrank or scattered the population, knowledge vanished with them. In those days, skills were not stored in libraries or hard drives. Skills lived in the minds and hands of individual human beings. And when a master craftsman died without having time to pass it on, that technology also sank into oblivion until someone somewhere else laboriously figured it out all over again from scratch. And this leads us to a truth that might make you pause and reflect. Every single one of those simple tools to survive demanded one thing that we take for granted today: mentorship and teaching. A father patiently showing his child every stroke against a stone core so that the flake splits off sharp instead of shattering into useless bits. An experienced hunter guiding a child on how to swing the atlatl thrower with just the right rhythm and angle. Not a single written line recorded it. Not a single web page to look up. All that vital knowledge existed only through demonstration, repetition, and human memory, handed down from one set of hands to another across hundreds of generations. Look back at our lives right now. If you forget how to do something, it takes you only a few seconds to search on your phone. If a skill fades away, people can easily restore it through films or archived documents. But our ancestors had no backup copy, just one broken link in the chain of teaching, and an entire technology accumulated over thousands of years could disappear forever from a tribe. That very fragility makes what they achieved all the more monumental. They were not merely passively surviving with what was readily available. They knew how to engineer, how to experiment, accept failure, adjust and improve, with nothing more than stone, wood, fire, animal fat, and a resilient creativity that seems to have flowed in human blood for generations. So, the next time you happen to hit a dead end facing a difficulty, right in the middle of a world with every convenience at your fingertips, remember the ancestor who used their hands and intuition alone to balance a wooden spear, or the one who meticulously mixed paint formulas inside a shell and saved it for tomorrow. They had nothing like what we have, and yet they still survived, and won in the most extraordinary way. Now you are standing in the dark once again, but this time you definitely will not feel afraid anymore, because you know exactly what your hands need to reach for.